Lance Grayson was no stranger to the long, lonely hours of a night shift security guard. The old manufacturing plant, with its rusting machinery and towering shelves of unused stock, had been shut down for years, leaving only him to wander the dimly lit hallways. The factory stood on the edge of town, a hulking relic of a forgotten era. The only sound during the graveyard hours was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, buzzing faintly like an ominous reminder of the place's age. Every night, Lance walked the same routes, checked the same doors, and monitored the same empty hallways. It was boring work, but it paid the bills, and for the most part, he liked the solitude. It gave him time to think, time to escape the noise of the world. But tonight, something felt different. Lance had just finished his second patrol when he noticed something out of place. As he passed by the assembly line area, a faint light flickered from behind a stack of crates. His hand instinctively went to the baton clip to his belt, but he quickly dismissed the thought. It was probably a glitch in the old lights, nothing to worry about. However, as he moved closer, he saw something that made his blood run cold. One of the workstations was lit, the machinery whirring faintly as though it had been used recently. Tools that had been locked in cabinets were now scattered across the workbench. A wrench. A hammer. A few screws. Whoever had been here knew exactly what they were doing. Lance's heart started to race as he scanned the room, his mind trying to make sense of the scene. It wasn't just the tools. It was the footprints on the floor. Large, muddy prints leading from the open tool cabinets and across the cement. They stopped right at the base of a dark stairwell that led to the upper floors. Lance swallowed hard, the hairs on his neck standing at attention. No one had access to the building after hours, and the only key was with him. He made sure of that every night. As he turned back toward the security office to review the cameras, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled again. The light in the hallway, just beyond the main entrance, was now on. It hadn't been on a moment ago. He was certain of it. Lance grabbed the flashlight from his belt and cautiously approached the doorway. The bulb buzzed in an erratic rhythm. He checked his watch, just past 3 a.m. His shift wouldn't end until dawn, and the idea of calling the police seemed excessive. Maybe it was just some prankster from the nearby town, trying to mess with him. But as he stepped closer, Lance's breath caught in his throat. The footsteps, bigger now and more distinct, continued to trace the concrete floor. He followed them slowly, turning a corner just outside the break room. The lights flickered again, and then, something moved in the dark. Lance froze. A shadow, tall and slender, darted between the steel columns. It didn't belong to anyone he knew. It didn't belong to anyone at all. It was too unnatural, too smooth, almost as though it was a part of the darkness itself. Lance's hand went to his radio. He considered calling his supervisor, but a voice in his head stopped him. What if they're just toying with you? His own fear felt foolish in that moment. He was a security guard, not some naive rookie. His job was to observe and report, nothing more. But when he turned back to the office, something shifted in the shadows, a small movement that was enough to set his nerves on edge. The footsteps were getting closer, not retreating as they should. He stepped quickly toward the stairs, his heart pounding in his chest. There was something so wrong about this, like the air was heavier, the walls pressing in around him. As he reached the top of the stairwell, a distant creak sounded from the floor above. Lance's flashlight shook in his grip, and he slowly, methodically, stepped forward. The upper floor was dark, the far corners lost in impenetrable blackness. The only light came from a single, flickering bulb that hung from the ceiling. There were no tools here. No footprints. The area appeared untouched, almost eerily pristine. Lance took a few more steps, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. As it fell upon the far wall, he froze. There, scrawled in thick, dripping red paint, were the words, "I see you." His stomach dropped. The cold fear that had been building for hours was now a tangible weight pressing on his chest. His mind screamed at him to leave, but his feet felt glued to the floor. Then, a soft scraping sound broke the silence, a faint rustling noise coming from somewhere deeper in the shadows. Before he could react, the ground beneath him trembled with a low, vibrating hum. The lights flickered again, and then, louder than before, a loud bang echoed from the darkened hallway behind him. Lance spun around. A figure was standing there, bathed in the dim glow of the emergency lights. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with long arms and a face obscured by shadows. The only thing Lance could make out was the faint gleam of eyes reflecting the light, a dull, sickly yellow that gleamed in the dark. His breath caught in his throat. He stumbled backward, his mind racing, heart thumping in his chest. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. The silence between them felt suffocating, thick with an unseen threat. Lance backed up another step. Then another. And another. The figure moved suddenly, almost too quickly, gliding across the floor in a smooth, predatory motion. The flashlight in Lance's hand flickered and died, leaving him in darkness. A loud crash erupted behind him, and before he could react, the shadow was on him, its cold breath on his skin, its sharp, claw-like fingers grazing his shoulder. Lance screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the cavernous emptiness of the factory. The intruder wasn't human. Whatever it was, it had been here for far longer than Lance had known. When morning came, they found the building empty. No footprints. No tools out of place. No sign of anything unusual. Except for the note. It was pinned to the security office door, written in blood, "You were never meant to see me." Lance never returned to the factory after that night. But sometimes, when the wind howls through the desolate plant, the flickering lights can still be seen from the road.